novel Basketball Diaries sets the scene in the fall of 1963. At the time, the United States were in the Vietnam War, and Jim Carroll, the author and the main character of the book, was heavily impacted from this. Not only was he worried for himself, but he saw authority figures as Hippocrates and oppressors, only interested in furthering their own power. The world is full of bad people who want to hurt each other. To cope with these feelings and a sense of disappointment in the world, Carroll looks for an outlet. He finds his outlet in basketball. He was attracted to basketball because there are rules, order, and he was a very good player. The song, For What It's Worth, talks about the war, Vietnam, and all the bad decisions being made, which goes along with Jim's belief that the people in authority were making poor decisions. Later in the story, Jim was with two of his friends at the peak of Hell's Angel. Hell's Angel is a cliff hanging over the Harlem River that is very high off the ground. The water was basically sewage water because the city's pipes drained into the Harlem River. The jump was an action that proved you aren't and that you were man enough to take the leap. Danny, his friend, didn't hesitate and plummeted into the Harlem River first. Secondly, his friend Johnny took the jump and had an awful landing. Finally, Jim took the leap into the river. This is an important part of the story because it shows you that Jim would fall into peer pressure just so his image wouldn't be looked on negatively. The song Jump fit in very well because the lyrics say how once you go up, nothing's ever going to bring you down, and you will quote-unquote jump. Jim first played in a basketball league called the Biddy League. He was 13 years old playing in this league. He was coached by a man named Lefty. At first, Jim really loved the game and everything it gave to him as a kid, especially because he was so good at it. It seemed as though Jim's religion was basketball, and that's all he cared about. Unfortunately, Jim found out that his coach had to lie in his birth certificate so that Jim could play. Jim was all about rules, and that's one of the main reasons he decided to play basketball, because it was organized and had rules. So when he found out he was cheating, he was very frustrated. To top it all off, his coach, Lefty, started to make sexual advances on him, so in turn, Jim decided to quit. That's why the song Losing My Religion fit so well, because basketball was Jim's religion, and when he lost it, he was devastated. In the fall of 1964, Jim experienced one of the first losses of his young life. After work, he rode down to attend the funeral of his old friend Bobby, who passed away from leukemia. He was reconnecting with some of his old friends when he caught a glimpse of Bobby in his casket. He described Bobby as thin and ape-like, his hair just gray patches on his scalp. He looked 60 years old, and he was 16. Once the funeral was over, he explains how the experience impacted him. I left dazed out in the streets like I had just come out of a 4-hour horror movie I didn't understand. I thought about that face all night and death. These words from Jim really showed you that the death of this friend really shook him up. The song Purple Rain is all about the loss of a friend at a young age and how it is very hard on a person, which really resonates with Jim's loss of his friend Bobby. Jim Carroll faced an addiction problem with drugs his whole life, but the drug that impacted his life the most was heroin. Heroin truly took over his life. Jim tried heroin for the first time because, to him, the funny part was that he thought heroin was the non-addictive stuff. He couldn't have been more wrong. When he got addicted to heroin, he lost everything close to him, especially his family and basketball. His addiction wasn't a cheap one, so he did very disturbing things to make money. The worst thing he did was trying to become a prostitute for men. When he didn't get high, he went through withdrawals, which made him terribly sick, and the only quick resolution was to get high again. Eventually, he was caught by the authorities with possession of 3 bags of heroin and was sentenced to 3 months in Rikers Juvenile Detention Center. The song Heroin is all about the highs and lows of heroin and how drugs makes a person push people away and isolate themselves, which ultimately ruins their life. This song is identical to Jim's situation of isolating himself and quitting things he used to enjoy, which was tearing his life apart. Towards the end of the book, Jim is released from Riker after 1 month because of the plea of his headmaster. Right after he got out of jail, he went to headquarters, which is a place for all the junkies and lowlifes to live. It is very unsanitary and unsafe to live in. Here he goes right back to his old habits and starts taking heroin and LSD. On the 4th day of living in the headquarters, having eaten no food in those past 4 days, he starts to have a realization. The last 2 sentences in the book read, I got to go in and puke, I just want to be pure. We now know that that was a pivotal moment in his life because he goes on to be a successful artist and author of many books. The song Somewhere I Belong talks about wanting something and wanting to heal and having to do it on your own. Jim wanted to become quote-unquote pure, and to do so, he had to do it all on his own.